Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about utilizing some of these other exercises to bring up weak points, to get through stale training, things like that, when you have built a base on all of your conventional exercises. And that's a point I want to bring home. I tell a lot of you guys out there that yes, a lot of these lifts have their place. I do them regularly. I do a fair amount of exercise variation these days, but that's for more advanced lifters. All right. Once you have built a base, and for most people, that's going to be my 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 strength standard on the big five, which is a squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, and weighted chin up. All right. Once you have a base on the big five, oftentimes progress comes to a grinding halt. And for a lot of people, it might take you 5+ years to even reach those standards. And people need to do these conventional exercises to build their base. And that's something that cannot be emphasized enough. Conventional exercises have enormous amounts of strength and conditioning material out there. They're the strength standards that we have for comparing one person to the next. So if you really want to know how you stack up in terms of strength, these are the lifts that you need to build, that you need to be compared to others on, and they're good foundational lifts, right? They are good foundational lifts. What a lot of these non-conventional exercises are beneficial for is bringing up weak points, sometimes doing variations that are slightly harder, right? A lot of these are variations that are slightly harder versions of your main lifts, right? A deficit deadlift, a box squat, a floor press, a weighted pull-up, double overhand instead of a chin-up. All right, these are a lot of examples. How about a safety bar squat, a safety bar box squat? Lift variations that are more difficult to do the opposite, to force you to use a lighter weight, do a more awkward position, absolutely have their place in your training once you have built a base. And there's a number of reasons for it. Number one, sometimes they put you at more awkward angles, like the safety bar squat, that will force you to build up weak links. They will put you at awkward angles, and being put into those awkward positions to even get close to lifting the same weight you could on the others matters a lot. Or they break things up, like the floor press. You lose your stretch reflex on the bench press. Now, it's not to say that the bench press is particularly known for a stretch reflex, but it does have one. You're removing that. The same thing on a box squat. You're breaking up that eccentric concentric chain. That reduces your ability to use a stretch reflex, and it forces you to hit these weights from a dead stop, oftentimes at a weak point in the range of motion. It makes the lift more difficult. So that can be used to build strength from those positions, and in some cases it forces you to use a slightly lighter weight. Well, if you're forced to use a slightly lighter weight, but you still get similar levels of muscle activation, that's beneficial from a training perspective, because one of the things that we find is that an exercise that forces you to use a slightly lighter weight, in some cases will allow you to do more total training volume and still recover from it. All right, and it's not to say that we don't have certain exercises where going heavier might have some merits. All right, if you're trying to get a little bit of an eccentric loading or work certain strength curves slightly different, something like a push press, and we'll come to that in a minute. But they force you into these positions to where you're forced to use a lighter weight. All right, that lighter weight can be easier to recover from. And there are coaches out there who believe that they want to get you as strong as possible with the lightest weight possible. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's going to do more reps. It's that you can do more total training volume. You can do more sets, because you're not going to be able to do more reps. If you use a lift variation that forces you to use a 5% lighter weight, you're not going to be able to do more reps. You're going to have to reduce the weight to do the same reps. But you can oftentimes do more total sets per week without going into an overreaching condition or eventually an overtraining condition. And this sort of stuff matters when we start talking about pushing maximum volumes of training. When you're doing very, very large amounts of training volume, this stuff can matter. It can matter a lot. This is where, again, things like compensatory acceleration come into play also. Then we have the fact that a lot of them put you into these awkward positions, such as look at what I'm doing right there now above. A safety bar box squat. That is a difficult, awkward lift. I have less than 400 pounds on that bar, and that is heavy. That's heavy. So some of these, it puts you into weaker positions, can force certain muscles, certain stability muscles to get built up. All right, it forces you into a very awkward position. Again, can cause more thoracic erector growth, even with a lighter weight. Same thing, look at this 3-inch deficit deadlift. Right, I've got 500 pounds on there. That 500 pounds is heavy coming off of a 3-inch deficit. But think of it in terms of the extra overload that it puts on certain muscles, the amount of additional mechanical tension because of the awkward angle involved. Right, even with a lighter weight, you are forced to recruit certain muscle fibers and joint angles that you don't normally get on that exercise. Or in the case on the deadlift, it forces what? It forces you to get stronger at the weakest point of the lift because it's extending the range of motion at the weakest part and actually making that part longer. So again, your weak link usually in the deadlift, a conventional deadlift, is off the floor. It can force you to get stronger even with a lighter weight. All right. Awkward lifting where we're forced to lift weights over our head, like the standing press, even though in some ways it's a conventional lift, it's become less conventional, but it's a good all-around strength builder. It's a good all-around strength builder. Then we can look at different variations, like the sumo deadlift. All right, the sumo deadlift, which I'm doing here. If you're normally a conventional puller, doing some sumo is a good idea because it builds slightly different muscles. It can help bring up weak links. And it's just an exercise variation for someone who normally pulls conventional. In some cases, you can pull a little more sumo depending upon your structure. Well, what about things like the push press? Again, lets you lift a little more weight, but it also kind of hits that one weak point through the chain, which is just above the head. It's using a little bit of leg drive to push the weight up. You still get a training effect from it because you're still pushing hard through there. So it's not a true partial. And then it can force a pretty significant amount of overload, particularly then on the eccentric back through that weak point on the way back down, in addition to forcing your triceps to work even harder. Like the push press, a lot of coaches out there feel that the push press is a superior tricep exercise. Subject to a lot of debate, but a lot of coaches feel that way. So maybe if your triceps are a weak link in your pressing, in general, the push press can be beneficial. Also, the push press carries over to certain sports more, so you're turning an overhead press into an even more full body exercise. And there's even data showing force generation on something like a push press in the thighs is actually higher than most other exercises. I think at least one study showed it even beat jumping squats for force generation. So doing some of these lift variations carries a lot of merit as we start to get more advanced or have sport-specific needs, again, in the context of them working slightly different strength curves or allowing us to break a plateau, not breaking a plateau because like a push press lets you necessarily lift a heavier weight, but more the fact that maybe we've gotten stagnant on a movement pattern. We've programmed certain movement patterns and they're no longer responding to minor variations in our loading, right? Maybe our periodization is causing us to stall a little bit even on certain lifts, and that's normal. We are going to stall. People need to accept that. As you get more advanced, you're going to see stalls. But coming through and hitting some of these other lifts, very, very heavy, and setting PRs and getting stronger on new lifts can have a positive psychological effect. And I think that's one of the big deals that it comes to some of these lift variations. They can break up staleness. They can train movement patterns differently in a way that if we're starting to get inflammation and overuse injuries, and sometimes inflammation will make us weaker. In other words, it's our body will sometimes make us weaker, our nervous system, because it knows we're close to getting injured on a movement pattern, and we change to a fresher movement pattern. What happens? We reduce some of that inflammation that's directly related to that overuse, and then we can start getting stronger again. In fact, I've seen guys like Jamie Lewis. Again, the guy's half crazy, but he's a mad genius in his own way. One of the things that he does when he starts to experience signs of getting close to overtraining, he just changes all his exercises and keeps pushing forward. Something that he's written about extensively, and he's a world record holder in powerlifting, raw powerlifting. And that's one of the variations that he does, just go to totally different exercises. So again, there's something to be said for breaking up these movement patterns a bit when you start to get stale, you're overreaching, things like that. So there's both a physical and a psychological benefit to utilizing some of these in regards to that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.